So today we'll be looking at what happens if you put carrots and celery stalk in this Bosch vacuum blender. It's a model 622 VitaMaxx, I think. They're all the same. There's just one Bosch vacuum blender. They just have different model numbers depending on accessories. Then we'll take the smoothie and look at what it looks like, and we'll also put it through some filters. And then, for the sake of my own curiosity, we'll be looking at what happens if we put the smoothie through a juicer. This is a Kuvings juicer. Here's the celery and some carrots. 2 stalks of celery and some carrots. Personally, I prefer not to take stalks off of celery. I just cut it lengthwise and then just put it back in the fridge. This way it holds longer. They've been cut into 2-inch pieces. Here's what the blender looks like inside. Here it is with the veggies. Here's what it looks like from the side. To this, I'll add 200 milliliters of water. Lock it up to hook up the vacuum seal and the vacuum pump. And then I'll just run it on auto. And it's done. This is what it looks like. We can unhook the pump. The container is still under vacuum, but let's look at it first. Sorry about the flicker, my LED lights are a little bit extra. So as you can see, there are kind of chunks on the sides, but if you look at the pulp itself, it's pretty fluid. Let's take it out and let's see what it's like. You have to pull this thing out to release the pressure. Now this is really difficult to do with one hand because you have to pull this back and lift the lid at the same time. This is what it looks like. Here's a small spoon of it. This is what it looks like. There are some of those chunks that are still sticking to the spoon. They just seem to be kind of glued together. They're not long chunks, they're just viscous to each other. Now here's the kind of most. Now this is a pretty big chunk here, right? So as you can see, this is this big. And I don't think you can get those out fully with a blender. So let's put this blender back on and let's see what happens if we run it for another, I would give it a couple of minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes more. So this time, instead of using auto mode, we'll be using the vacuum. And then we'll just set it to maximum and leave it like that. There we go. It's all vacuumed up. So we're gonna set it to max. Oh, and by the way, the stuff over here, it's mostly like apple juice, but like apple mousse, but has some chunks like here, here, and here. All right. Alright, that's 2.5 minutes. I turned it off for a sec so that it doesn't form like pockets where stuff just never makes it to the blade. So let's open this up and let's see if it changed any. So this is what it looks like when you pull back the pressure release valve. So this is what it looks like now. It looks a little bit more like applesauce. You can also feel that it's kind of warm near the bottom. Obviously we've been running it for a while. I have cleaned off the plate as well as the spoon. And here's a spoonful of the smoothie. Now this is really applesaucy. There are no bits there. In fact, the only time I picked up a bit whilst putting this stuff out was when I scraped the side of the container where there's going to be larger bits. And all of this stuff, this is really applesauce. So let's try to put some through this thing. Alright, cleaned off the plate again. Here's another spoon of the smoothie. Let's try and put it through this thing. This would be so much easier with an extra pair of hands. Alright, so this filter didn't actually catch anything at all. And what we have here is just more of the same thing. Like the thicker part of the smoothie kind of got held up here, but that's just because it's viscous. Like if we poured the whole thing out for this thing, most of it would make it through, and some would just stay glued to the top of the sieve, I guess, to the underside of the sieve actually. Like you can see I'm scooping this thing up with my thumb, and then there's pretty much nothing left. Cleaned and dried the plate again, and let's try putting it through this filter. This one might be tough because it's like really deep. I can really reach with my thumb inside it. So let's see what happens here. Alright, so here's another spoon of this delicious stuff. So this is the apple juice again, or apple sauce or whatever. And now with this filter, most of the smoothie stays on top of the filter, and what we get at the bottom is just this juice. So all the pulp, all the fiber, I guess, stays on top in dry form. This is what it looks like. It's really fine. It's really fine powder, or whatever it is. And this is just juice. So next up, let's try putting the remaining smoothie through this juicer. This is the amount of remaining smoothie. It's pretty much the whole thing. I don't think any of it is gone, honestly. So with this juicer, this is where the juice comes out, and this is where the pulp comes out. So here we go. This is actually an extra that I bought on Amazon. It fits perfectly in this and this inlet here, but it didn't come with the juicer, and we don't actually need it here. So let's just start a juicer. Let's put the smoothie in. There's some stuff remaining here, so I'm just gonna scoop it in with a silicone paddle. There's actually quite a bunch of stuff left inside. I'm gonna scoop it all in. So this thing has been running for a couple of minutes. There's literally no pulp coming out, just a little bit of juice leaking out. There's no pulp here. So let's open it up and let's see what comes out. This is, by the way, how you should be doing this. You should let it fill up and then you open it up. And then you have to close it pretty soon, because with normal vegetables, like if you put in whole vegetables, there could be chunks in here, which make it over the sieve. Like if you see the sieve, this is where the vegetables go in, and sometimes tiny chunks make it over and in here. And then they make it into the juice, which you don't want. This is a lot of this, the same pulp that we had from the plastic mesh filter, the white one that we tested second. And this is just regular unclarified juice. It's actually, usually when I make juice with celery and carrot, it's usually way clearer than that. So I guess it shows that this is going to have like some microscopic pulp in it that the filter didn't get out. Because you see, this whole thing here, this here is a filter as well, right? And those tiny holes are where the vegetables have to go through to make it into the juice. So if there's pulp smaller than those holes, then this pulp is going to make it in here. So blending and then juicing gives you more pulp than just juicing. But this pulp is going to be very fluid. It's not like it's gonna clog anything up. So if you're being fed through a tube, this is never gonna clog it up. It might leave some residue on the sides. Like you can see, this container already has some residue, right? So it might stick to the walls, but it's not gonna create like a major clog from the celery fiber or whatever. So this is the plate. It's been cleaned again. Let's pour some of this smoothie juice out. And this is what it looks like. It's the same thing we got out of the white filter. Okay, so I cleaned the plate again and I cleaned the white filter again, and let's pour some juice through it. I don't think the metal filter will actually stop anything because it's got like really large holes, so it doesn't really matter. And this is what happens. It still stops like a tiny amount of pulp. See, there still is some pulp in here. It doesn't make it through all the way. Still some stuff. But this pulp is really, really fine. There's nothing here that could block someone's feeding pipe. I think. I'm not an expert. Alright, and taste test. Tastes like anything you'd buy in a bottle, honestly. Just tastes like normal as vegetable juice. Really good. You can feel that it has a bit of pulp in it. You can tell. Like there's quite a bit. Pretty good. Okay, so I have cleaned the insides of the juicer. So let's juice the same amount of veggies just directly. Let's see what happens. Oh, and by the way, I forgot that, but I was also told that if the smoothie has bubbles in it, then that's also a problem when using a feeding tube. And if you've noticed, the smoothie, especially after the extended period of blending, had no bubbles in it at all. It was like pure applesauce. So the short blend, like the auto button, had no bubbles in it, but it still had chunks. So it wasn't fully applesauce like. But when we added like 2.5 minutes on top, it was just pure applesauce. And no bubbles in either of them. Okay, another 2 celery stalks and carrots. I'm gonna have to chop them up into much shorter pieces because this stuff, the celery stalk, has string in it that ends up clogging the juicer, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna chop this pretty finely, like 3 to 5 millimeter chunks. Like definitely less than 1 centimeter. It doesn't matter how wide the chunks are, because the string runs lengthwise with the ridges. So something like this is perfectly fine. You can actually see the string inside. Whereas something like this, it's not very wide, but it's long. This won't do. And this won't do either. So you gotta chop this up or probably just throw it away, because who cares? The leaves don't have string in them, but they still clog up the juicer. So I'm gonna get rid of those as well. So all of this stuff, that goes in the refuse, right here. Now with the carrots, you want the chunks to be a bit bigger. You want them like 1/2 inch, roughly. Okay, well, I guess 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Something like that. The reason is that making those chunks a little bit bigger makes it easier for them to get compressed by the screw. If you look at this screw here, that's where the carrot comes in. And this is the perfect size because it gets compressed here, right? If it's too small, it's just going to make it through the screw without a lot of juice coming out because it's going to be too small to get compressed. And if it's too large, then the screw will have to crush it and will end up stalling. That's why the juicer has 2 settings. Number 1 is forward, and number 2 is reverse. You can see it here. And sometimes when you're juicing carrots, you have to put it in reverse when it stalls. So let's put all of this on this foldable cutting board. I actually only ever use it as a scoop. I never use it to cut on. I think they're just too small to cut on. But they're perfect as scoops for a bunch of stuff. And this is where this thing comes in. Because you can just dump stuff right in and it's gonna make it into the hole. Like imagine dumping stuff from this scoop into this tiny little hole. Most of it falls out. So I'm happy I got this. So let's start the juicer. Again, it's fully empty. Everything's clean. And let's dump some veggies in. Just like that. Now, usually I have a hand to help me, but this is working just fine. Sometimes it jams, so you have to put it through, but it's fine. It's better than if it goes everywhere. And that's it. Stuff's working. If you see stuff that's kind of stuck on the sides, you can use one of those to kind of push it in. It's not really that dangerous to do when you're running the juicer, because even if you're careful, it's not gonna get caught. But even if it gets caught, like if you're fast, you're gonna pull it back out. And besides, it's just rubber, so it usually just slips back out. Okay, so we've got a bunch of juice. We've got a bunch of pulp, which you can see right here. Now this is where the pulp comes out, and it dumps into the basket or the container or whatever. So all this pulp at the bottom, that's new stuff, right? You can usually stop juicing once the pulp has stopped moving, but sometimes, very rarely, stuff kind of gets clogged in the middle of the juicer, and then after a while it gets unclogged, and then the juicer continues pushing out the pulp later after it has stopped, but not this time around. I can look inside the juicer and I can see that there's nothing stuck to the screw. So let's stop the juicer. Oh, by the way, I haven't been running it for like 5 minutes during this cut. It was like just 2 seconds. Stop the juicer and open the spout. And that's pretty much it. So we have some more juice. It's a lot less than we had before. The same amount of veggies, but it's less. Probably because it has less pulp in it. It's way less juice. It's like half. If you look here, this is barely covered. And it was the same amount of vegetables, stalk from the same celery plant, and it's less. So let's put it on the plate. It's been cleaned again. Let me just dry it off with a paper towel. And let's pour some of this juice out. So while there's some like kind of larger chunks, they're not as large as we got out of the blender after the short blend. They're still chunks, but they're like tiny. I don't think they're going to clog anything. I don't know. So I cleaned the white filter again and the plate. There's a bit of lint here. So let's pour some juice into the filter and let's see what we're left with. And so now this time, as you can see, there's a little bit of pulp. But this pulp is actually coarser than we got out of the blender after the extended run. This pulp is coarser. And this is what we get in the plate. I mean, it's the same as before. So whereas previously, the pulp was like a very fine powder that was just stuck together due to sugars and some moisture in it. This thing is still like tiny little chunks, like very tiny ones. They're like less than a millimeter. They're still chunks rather than pulverized. So now for the taste test. The juice that was in the plate tasted like normal clarified juice, but it had this very earthy tone to it, which is normal for celery stalk. Whereas the juice we made out of the smoothie and the smoothie itself didn't have that. It didn't have like this biting, earthy celery stalk flavor that you get if you just bite into a celery. You don't get that with the blender. And now let's try this. So it has the same kind of earthy tone and this bite that you get from this thing. And of the pulp that was in it, there was a bunch of pulp. And it was pretty big particles. They got immediately stuck on my teeth. I can easily see them kind of accumulating somewhere and clogging something. Whereas blending and then juicing didn't have that. Or just blending for like an extended amount of time, where we did the auto and then 2.5 minutes. So if you're doing feeding for a tube, this is probably what you should be using. Now, I'm no expert on this, so try things out. Make sure you can return this thing if it doesn't fit your needs. But if it does, then it could help you. One nice thing about this thing is that when it blends without air. So it doesn't blend air into the smoothie or the sauce or whatever you're making. And this means that it doesn't oxidize nearly as quickly. So you can make it once and then just leave it out the whole day. It's still gonna be green by the end of the day, which is impossible with a normal blender. Smoothies out of a normal blender go rank like literally within minutes. It's a huge difference. I've been using this thing for years, and I can tell you it's a real difference. It's not just kind of movie magic or whatever. It's not made up. So all of those ads on YouTube that you keep on seeing about this thing, they're actually true. Also, on another note, if you're doing tube feeding and you don't want it clogged, probably a good idea to have one of those things right at the entrance. In case it gets clogged, it'll get clogged right at the entrance, and then you can just take it out and clean it off real quick. And then you're good to go again. As for the juicer, I believe that this is going to be more nutritious, but it's going to have clogging issues. So you might want to, if you make juice with it, might want to put it through one of the filters. Either this one or the white plastic one. Then you will not be getting clogs. But you also get less fiber, because if you did the smoothie and then put that through the juicer, then you got juice that was like really smooth. But it also had all of this like tiny fiber that was not chunks anymore, but kind of like powdered fiber, which is helpful. So it's going to be more nutritious in that way. Whereas this cold pressed juice is going to be more nutritious in other ways. I guess you can tell in the flavor. So, horses for courses. I think personally both are useful, but this is expensive and the blender is expensive, and the blender's gonna be probably much more useful for you. Oh, and by the way, you can buy all sorts of spare parts for this. So you can buy this, you can buy this, you can buy this, you can buy this, you can buy the motor, you can buy literally everything. At least here in Europe. I don't know what it's like in the US, but I can imagine you can get it in the US as well. Or maybe you can import it. I don't know. So I guess that's it. I hope this video is helpful for someone. If you have any comments, experiences, questions, queries, just leave them in the comments below. And hopefully someone more knowledgeable than me will come along and tell you. Or if you feel that I might want to test something else, just let me know. As long as I have this blender and the other juicer, I can make tests. So just let me know. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.